can't defend. He's got the outside line for the second part, and he can't hold on.
Going the long way around, we're going to be 3 wide for the lead as they all come to the line. Who is going to take it in the end?
And here comes Lockwood. He's going to make the move to the outside. Quinn tries to force him off a little bit, but there he goes. It's going to be side by side through turn 1.
Will he be able to cover him off? He does. Weaving back to the left-hand side. Reynolds is trying everything. The kitchen sink is being thrown at it.
They're leaning on each other. Coming into turn number 3. It's going to be a drag race through 3 and 4. Coming back to the line. Here comes Frisch on the bottom.
Richard's going to hold the inside. Tries to be the late breaker here. They're going to be side by side through the final chicane. They bang doors, but keep it clean.
As they're still 4 wide on the run down into the back straightaway. Demerit's looking for a line as well. What is going on in Michigan?
Novak into the fence. They're still beating and banging.
Oh
and to the line.
He is much faster coming through there. Is there damage on Challenger? Aphrodite is ahead. There's going to be a race to the line. Who is going to get it?
Good evening and welcome back to Total Sim Sports coverage of the European Sprint Pure Driving School series. This is already week 2. It's come by very quickly. It doesn't feel like it's been 7 days since we broadcast Hockenheim for everyone, and we're coming tonight from sunny Spa Francorchamps. As we can see now, our LMDh class just gridding up behind the safety car. It's an extremely strong split tonight. We'll get into that in a minute, but first we want to say we've got Sean Cranley-Swash on cameras tonight, and joining us on commentary we've got Michael Paul. Michael, good evening and welcome to the broadcast. You looking forward to the race tonight?
Good evening, Chris. Yeah, thank you for having me this evening. As I say, first day on the training job, and it's going to be exciting to see such a high split at Spa. There's going to be some interesting lap times and certainly some interesting sends from back in the pack when it gets there.
I think that is definitely going to be the case, and as we touched on just a minute ago, it's an extremely competitive split this evening. Have got some very quick drivers here. We'll just bring you through a summary of the qualifying results. Moreno Sirica, he's on pole, he's done a 1:56.673, and just take a look at those interval times. Owen Carroll, half a tenth behind, following on the same road. Alexander Spetz, he's in third. He's got this week's fastest lap time in race, and as you may well know, he's got over 10,000 IR. Arthur Lehook and Daniel Lorenko are 4th and 5th, and then in the LMP2 field, we'll have to go through this quickly because we're nearly going live. Galasso Lorenzo's on pole, Charlotte Morelli in 2nd, Andrei Efimenko is 3rd, Max Kuss 4th, all of those separated by 3/10, and then Christian McCrelly in 5th. And then our GTE field, Tobias Ogrodnik, another very quick driver, he is on pole. Vince Scorsad in 2nd in the Chevrolet. Charlie Nielsen 3rd, Henry Sarlo 4th, Andreas Linder 5th, again less than half a second separating them over a 2-minute lap as Moreno Sirica takes us round the bus stop chicane, and we are about to go racing for a whole hour here. He's just holding us, just teasing us a little bit. He wants that good run into the source, and off we go, and it does look like Sirica's got a good run. Spetz is already out of the hook, have got ahead of Owen Carroll. That is a very poor start for Carroll, that's unfortunate for him. Sirica's got through nice and cleanly. Can the rest of the field follow him through? A few people just taking evasive actions onto the outfield, but actually that's a very clean start from LMDh as they come up through Eau Rouge. Lots of downforce in these cars, so they can afford to take a little bit more risk. It looks like LMP2 also have made it through pretty clear, although there does appear to be a bit of a big gap, and they've spread out already, and we can perhaps have a look at the GTEs in a second as well to see if they have managed it in this 40 car grid this evening. Yes, indeed, that's not a GTE, that car number 40, so let's hope through Eau Rouge we don't see anything too silly, but that's a nice gap for Tobias Ogrodnik, who is, well, he's still leading in class, and he's managed to gap P2 thanks to that road LMP2, but it doesn't look like we've had any first corner incidents, which is a little bit of a surprise. As you can see, finally Tom Gambino's managed to get through. Don't forget the LMP2s are slightly down on power compared to last season, because our primary class here, the LMDHs, they are about, well, certainly around Hockenheim ring, they're about 5 seconds a lap slower than the LMP1s were. But Michael, that was a surprisingly clean start. What do you make of that?
Yeah, definitely. Was very surprised going into the first turn after the green flag. was very surprised that Owen Carroll dropped a couple of places on the start. Very unlike him normally. Very surprised with the clean starts back in the GTE. Very strange what happened to the number 40 in the P2. It'd be nice to see back later on what actually happened at the start of the P2 category.
If I had to guess, I reckon there's been some silliness into the chicane. That's often what happens in those slower classes, at least in my experience. And we can see Moreno Sirica, he's still in the lead, but this is the trouble. And he's outbraked himself a bit under pressure there. Is Alexander Spets going to be able to take advantage of that into La Source? Of course, the trouble with making the move into there is you've got that big, long straight after Eau Rouge. You've got the Kemmel straight into the chicane. So maybe this was a bit of a tactical decision from Spets, just not to make that move just yet, because all you're going to do is bunch the pack up, and really what these top drivers are going to want to do is try and gap as much of the field as possible. And of course, as you can see on the track map in the top right hand corner, at some point those three classes are going to start intermingling, and we're going to get to see just how good any of our drivers are at managing traffic. I just want to sort of point out as well, Fabrice Cornelis, he is in 6th in LMDh. He has made up 4 places from the start. He started P10. You see him there in the white and pink number 7 car as he just goes wide. I'm just commentators cursed him. My apologies to Fabrice. We'll try not to get it happen too often. It always does happen though, doesn't it? But so far so good for him. And we can go and have a look. We're now following Charlotte Morelli, who is right on the back of Galasso Lorenzo. They're all in order there in LMP2. And again, it's surprised me to see we've not had any. Well, you see some smoke there, but no real. No, we're nearly we're a lap and a half in, and no major incidents. This is unheard of for top class motorsport.
Top class motorsport, you say, Chris. Top class, top drivers, top split, everything, and just to see that one bit of smoke wouldn't surprise me at Spa. We definitely got so far some really good clean racing.
Yeah, and clean and close racing. As you can see here, we're now with Andrew Dawson, who is down 2 positions from the start, but he is right in the middle of the pack. But I think at the moment everyone's just in a bit of a holding pattern. I think Alexander Spets is probably our best bet for a move in the near future. You can see he's still really close to Sirica. How is Sirica going to be under braking on this lap after he slightly overdid it on the previous lap? That time was about as good as you could hope. But with a 10k iRacing driver behind you, you're going to be under immense pressure for quite a long time. And the longer this continues, the more an advantage Alexander Spets and Arthur LeHook just behind in 3rd are going to have, because they will be fuel saving. And yes, that's not going to add up to dozens of seconds, but when you look at the moment, we've got 0.3 of a second between the top 2. When we get to the pit stops, this could make all the difference. But at the moment, everyone behaving, it seems. Although, and again, I've cursed it because it sounds like we've had an accident in LMP2. I think this will be Aaron Full. Let's go and have a look. Oh, we've got Eduardo Roberte. So let's see what happened to him. This is coming into the bus stop chicane. And you can see number 39. Maybe a big spin. Luckily not to collect anyone. And I wonder if that's just a case of, and I think another car going the wrong way back there, that looked like. Yeah, I think that's just a case of, Michael, this happens to me. Does it happen to you where you see someone else make a slight error and you just follow them?
Yeah, that's it, especially in that same corner. A bit too heavy on the brakes after maybe 2 or 3 laps, full tyres, full brakes. It just slides from underneath them. The hard thing is not to take anybody else with you by mistake.
Yeah, we did see that there. I think the reaction times you need sometimes, it's not possible, especially when there's a car behind you. And we've got a side-by-side battle here between what look to be teammates, Lucas Lang and Dominic Nurkel. And Lucas Lang's got the inside. Does he have the straight line speed? They get very close together, and that's a very interesting Chevrolet just behind him, Leonardo Nastasi. And Lang's come out of that the best. And I think Nurkel has just managed to hold off Nastasi there, but that was very cheeky there, because Nastasi actually won the last race. So he's going to feel down in 7th out of 13 GTEs that he can make a bit of time up here. But as we said, this is a very strong split this week. Not that it was exactly weak last time out, but the really elite of the elite seem to have come out this week. And yeah, that was I think our first on-track overtake that we've seen of the race, and we can now go to a Grodnik leading GTE, but it's the same story in all 3 classes. None of the leaders have been able to build a gap, and we'll go and have a look at LMP2. Same thing here, Charlotte Morelli and Max Kuss just behind, keeping Galasso Lorenzo really honest. But I think at the moment, Michael, to me it seems like everyone's happy to stay in this holding pattern and not fight too hard. Just try and work together and try and build those gaps. Is that how you're reading it?
Yeah, I think looking at that just now, there's a few gaps appearing in the LMP2 field just now. Cruz has got over 1 second Tinto, and here we are. Spets has overtaken the leader in the LMDh category to take the P1 and going up into the third, fourth corner. So let's see if he keeps his position going into the end of the lap.
Lovely clean overtake from him, and nice and cooperative from Moreno Sirica. Again, just putting the strategic hat on, not wanting to fight it too hard because we've still got 52 and a bit minutes of racing to go. No need to bunch up all of the drivers behind you. Maybe just work with the other drivers. And I think we're seeing that here again. Charlotte Morelli, who I think of the 3 second place drivers in this race, has been the one, bit of a slide there from Lorenzo. You can just see just how hard they are pushing these machines as they go wide through that corner. And I think again we're just seeing 2 drivers. It's worth, if you're in second, maybe just pushing a bit just to see if you can make a mistake out of the driver in first. We saw earlier with Sirica outbraking himself a little bit into the bus stop chicane, but so far Galasso Lorenzo hasn't made a mistake. I'm just touching the wood of my desk because I don't want to keep cursing these drivers. It's not fair to them. Again, I've already highlighted once, just have a look at that track map. In previous races in the old configuration of this series, we'd sort of look at around the 20-minute mark to be where the classes all bunch up together, all 3 of them at once, and it's just going to take a little bit longer here, just where Spa is a slightly longer track, as Owen Carroll and Daniel Lorenco are so close together. Lorenco is actually looking to go through side by side in Eau Rouge, and he's got that move done. That is very brave driving. But is that going to allow Owen Carroll a chance with the draft to get back at him?
Well, let's hope so. He seems to be dropping back just a little bit, but I don't think he's going to get it into the next one. I think that the overtake is definitely going to go for Rouge, and I think he's Alves in the position in front now, especially because we see it happening again on the next lap.
I wonder if Owen Carroll's perhaps gone for a slightly higher downforce setup and just doesn't have the top line speed to compete in class, but that may well be an advantage for him when it comes to trying to get past traffic later in the race, and he can do it in the turns. As Charlotte Morelli now, is it her turn to try and get past Galasso Lorenzo? But no, again, I think just trying to save a little bit of fuel there. You can see that gap increase ever so slightly just before the braking zone. A little bit of a slide there as we're coming through this corner, but again, sometimes when the gap is this small and you've got Carl just behind you, it's not necessarily worth forcing the issue just yet, and that seems to be what's happening in LMP2. And of course, don't forget, last week out we saw Yus quite wide from Lorenzo there. He really is pushing hard, but last week we saw in the LMP2 field Yus Baumeister quite comfortable in the lead and then just getting taken out through no fault of his own, and that's your race over. And that was sort of half an hour in, so it almost doesn't matter who's leading right now because there's just so much racing left to go. Anything could happen. And Michael, we've got another battle here in the midfield of the LMDHs.
Yeah, certainly. It'd be nice to see if we can get one of these overtakes done going up Eau Rouge, especially if Cornelius gets overtaken by his driver behind. That should be a good battle going up Eau Rouge onto the back straight.
It's been very well behaved so far. Cornelis is up 3 places, although actually that was 4 to start with. So Marcus Deck has managed to get past and build a 2-second gap. And now Progerio is looking to see if they can also make the move. Oh, little bit of a twitch there.
Yeah, there, Chris.
He's done it. It's a good straight line build. He got very close there. That was a little bit cheeky, just that move in the braking zone to get back in, but I can see why you'd do it. But it really requires the cooperation of the driver you're battling with, and Cornelis there, very safe, just not going into the back of him, although it could have been very easily done. All it takes is just a tiny lock up and it happens. And another lap, another chance in the Kemmel Straight. Is Morelli going to make a look at a move now? Is Lorenzo going to try and defend? There is again a little bit of a twitch. No, we're not going to see a move here. In fact, we're seeing bump drafting. It's not something you often see in ESS. It's kind of cool to see it here. But again, it just that's Morelli sort of saying, look, you need to get a move on because we've got Koos just behind us. And I'd very much like to turn this three-way battle into a two-way battle. But again, don't forget, the longer you stay in second, the more you can afford to fuel save. You're maybe pushing a bit less on the tyres as well, although with the dirty air, that's probably going to be counteracted by the extra heat you're putting through. And yeah, it looks like this is going to be quite a tactical race compared to last week, which is, we saw quite a lot of overtakes all throughout the race last week. This race seems a fair sight more tactical. Maybe that's down to how close the grid is.
Possibly that could be a case with the high rating drivers and the high profile names that we've got in this split. A lot of drivers I can see are just taking their time and biding their time with their overtakes. So we may get less crashes, less incidents, some more superior overtakes on the back straight, even coming down into the final corner.
And those of you who watched us in previous seasons gone by will remember we've had some absolutely incredible battles between the drivers at Spa. It just is such a good circuit, conducive for good racing. We've seen LMP2s going 3 wide down the Kemmel Straight and not dying. And as you can see on the track map, I promise I'll stop talking about that at some point, but we are about to have the LMDh field catch the GTE field, and that's where we really separate the excellent drivers from the world-class drivers, because it's one thing being able to drive very quickly in clean air, it's another thing being able to drive very quickly and getting past the slower class cars. And Alexander Spets, you can see, is just about to come up on Eric Van Spijker in the GTE. He is in the Porsche just ahead, you can see here. Quite an awkward place to catch because of just how much downforce these LMDHs have, but he has got that move done. I think the LMP2 is going to struggle to make the same kind of move there because they don't have quite the same level of downforce. Just on board with Spets, you can see just how difficult it is to decide which line to take at any given moment. He's 2 down, he's got another 11 to go. Michael, how do you see this going?
As long as he keeps his gaps going through some of these corners, so the GTE cars make it easy for him. Alexander Spets hopefully gets through this traffic quite quickly.
Well, I've always banged this drum. It's all about the car's body language. If you make it obvious where you're going to go, and that goes for the slower class and the faster class, you can avoid so many incidents. I mean, you see there with that GTE, stick to one side of the track and it's all good. But the challenge is going to be here. You can see Henry Sarlo, he is fighting with Charlie Nielsen. This is for P3 in the GTE field, so you know they are very high up in the field. They're not going to want to cede any ground to the LMDHs as they come through, because they are quite rightfully battling their own race. They've done the blue flags are entirely advisory, and we'll just have to see it goes. You can see just how busy the track is here, and you don't want to be having to make that move into Eau Rouge as we do go 2 wide through it. I believe we've been fine. Dominic Knockel, if he's looking in his rearview mirror, is probably going to have his heart rate go up a few notches. But again, we've managed to make it through here, but Knockel and Lang are now fighting, and again, they're possibly teammates. No love seems to be lost. They're getting very close, but not being too argy-bargy into the corner as we now have another LMDH coming through. That's car number 4, that's Arthur LeHook. And we go back again, we can see Fabrice Cornelis' early qualifying success is slowly being eroded. He's now only up 2 places. But again, we've so far, and it's early days when it comes to traffic, but so far we've not seen any incidents. It's been very well behaved from all our drivers, but I think personally, Michael, it's going to get worse when the LMP2s get involved, because they're being, these 2 classes have got quite a big gap in speed, but the LMP2s, they bridge that gap.
Yeah, with the LMP2 especially being down on that little bit of power this season, you are going to see the LMP2 struggle that a little bit more in some of the tighter corners to try and get the overtake, especially like we're seeing just now with the LMDH overtaking the Corvette and the Porsche and the corners, making it so easy for the LMP2 to struggle to get it done. The only time will tell.
We'll see there, Sirica got held up by one of those GTEs after LeHouk got held up just before, but it's actually worked out for LeHouk. He's managed to get through before we've even got into the braking zone for the bus stop chicane. So this is exactly what we were talking about taking advantage of traffic. Probably not a tactical decision from LeHouk, but it's him that it's worked out for, and he's now up to P2. But all the while this is happening, Alexander Spets is just able to build and build and build that gap, and we've seen it in previous seasons with drivers like Jan Kurbs. You just, once you've got that gap, you don't have to take the big risks, and it sounds like we've had a crash and we might be able to go take a look. Michael, do you want to walk us through what has happened to Aaron Phil here?
So he's going up Eau Rouge, and looking at that from the camera, he's just slowed down going up onto the back straight. So I'm not sure what he's actually done there, but has ended up in the pits and then obviously potentially retired on that. So yeah, we'll try and have a little look into that and see what actually went wrong for it.
Not the most ideal place to break down. I wondered for a second if that was qualifying fuel, but we're 16 minutes in, so if it was qualifying fuel, he's not doing optimal qualifying runs. So maybe we'll never find out. He wasn't exactly threatening the podium positions, so it's still a shame to see our first retirement of the race, but it is a surprise to see a first retirement of the race 17 minutes in. That's unheard of for sim racing. It's certainly in the races I've been involved in. And again, you can see some drivers are just a little bit more confident getting around there. I think the number 19, Nilsson, might be a little bit annoyed about the way that LMD... Oh, and there's contact! We've had our first contact! Oh, and there's follow-up there. Nilsson's going to have some damage, and I think the main beneficiary there is going to be the LMDh that got through first. But that's 2 GTEs and an LMDh taken out from that, and that is unfortunate. And again, it's the fine margins on this circuit, and perhaps the slow, how much relatively slower the GTEs are going to be around these medium speed corners. It just seems to have caught out some of the LMDHs, because the opposing speed is absolutely insane with the downforce the LMDHs have. So let's see what's happened from Ruggerio's point of view, and he's managed to get round, but and he's managed to raise the barrier. That's extremely unfortunate for him. That's almost certainly going to affect him. And yeah, Svelasi got squeezed as well there, but that's Ruggerio, Almeida and Svelasi seem to be the ones that have lost out from that. They're the ones that have dropped down. But you know, for every driver that loses out, there'll be another driver that benefits, and in the GTEs, that seems to be Lucas Lang, who is now up to third, and that is 6 places from his qualifying group. You can see Svelasi there. The gap was left, but perhaps just quite not enough of a gap, and our producer Sean, who is part of Rhino Motorsport, will be absolutely gutted for his teammate there. We had high hopes for him, and it's just unfortunate that his race, if not ended, certainly any sort of challenge for the higher spots has ended. And yeah, we can see here Sirica, he's actually been dropped by Lehoux, so Lehoux had quite a bit of pace that we've not really noticed up until this point, because Sirica is now having to defend from Daniel Lourenco, and similarly in LMP2, Max Kuss has been quite happy to sit behind Charlotte Morelli, who in turn has been quite happy to sit behind Galasso Lorenzo. But perhaps we should give a shout out to these three for being able to get Pietro Schettino in fourth, because again, Schettino is a familiar face to ESS broadcast splits from last year, and we know from those he is a very quick driver in his own right. So to be able to bridge a 3-second gap to them, that is very good going indeed. But you can just see lovely clean air for these LMP2s. I almost wonder if it would be worth if there's any sort of strategy benefit to these LMP2s, maybe pitting just as the hypercars catch them up later on in the race.
There's Morelli again going for the bump drive to see if they can build a gap with Kuss, but I think it's a bit too late for that now. Chris, I think that these three are going to be in a tight fight to the end, first, second and third.
Yeah, I think we're going to start seeing them get a bit more aggressive after their pit stops, I suspect. But it's quite nice to see us. I think we've had an issue in LMP2. Andre Villela is also rapidly dropping down the field. But it's good to see from Morelli's perspective that Max Kuss is also willing to cooperate in this bump draft-a-thon, or at the very least in this let's not go crazy until later in the race strategy. And I mean, it's working out for the three of them, because if they can secure the podium between them, they can then work out who gets to stand on the top spot of it later on in the race. And all that Pietro Schettino and Andrei Efemenko can do is watch and try and drive as quick as they can, and this is what happened to Andre Villela. So very twitchy between the 18 and the 25. That's Christian McCrelly in the other car, and then they've got the 34 of Efemenko just ahead. Villela pulling out to the inside, gets through, and just a little bit of contact. Does that unsettle? Yeah, that's unsettled the car. He's gone round. The other two have managed to make it out. That's actually very kind, very safe re-entry onto the field. So I think props to the driver there, but Efemenko has managed to retain that 5th position. McCrelly in 6th. And just again, go show you these drivers pushing so hard, the fine margins that can cause problems when you just get that little bit of unexpected contact.
Yeah, it seemed like Charlotte Morelli then wanted to go for the overtake on Lorenzo, but decided to back out a bit at the last moment. Very surprising. I'd like to see why she decided to do that at the last minute.
I wonder just how much of a difference there will be in pit stop times between these two drivers, because Lorenzo hasn't had the benefit of another car punching a hole in the air and just making it just a little bit easier to reach those top speeds. And we can have another replay now. Let's see what's happened with Charlie Nielsen. And we're going too wide through a part of the circuit. You don't want to be going too wide if you can avoid. Luckily using a generous runoff there as we come down to Rivage, and slightly cutting the driver off there, Lucas Lang. He's had to slow down. This is all very tight between. I mean, this is 6 GTEs, and it's all safe and sound so far. Let's hope it carries on that way. Nilsson is now at the head of this very long train. Grodnik and Skorsad, who are up ahead in first and second together, they have bridged a 10-second gap over this gaggle of cars. And let's just see, is Lucas Lang that fussed about getting past Charlie Nielsen right now, or are we going to see another, let's call it a DRS train? I'm pretty sure GTEs don't have a drag reduction system, unless you can call the car in front a drag reduction system, which sort of is functioning as one right now.
Yeah, it certainly looks like that, but what you don't want is for Lucas Lang to be held with Charlie Nielsen for a couple of laps. Because what I might do is bring in the cars P9, 10 and 11 into this party to give us more of a battle going around the circuit. So I think we'll go really wide. Hopefully we'll see that. You never know.
I quite like what Charlie Nielsen did there with his line. Just, and you can see a couple of GTEs coming into the pits in the background. That's an early pit window for them, but that very much would take them to the end of the race. But Charlie Nielsen coming through the bus stop chicane, he just defended the line and then gently moved over in the braking zone, just to sort of discourage any late lunges, but still be able to take the ideal line through. And it doesn't look like there's any danger of Lucas Lang getting through. As we switch over to Alexander Spets, you can see he has got Tom Gambino just up the road from him, and then a nice gap until he really builds up into the LMP2s. But Spets is nearly 3 seconds clear, and Lucas Lang has managed to get past Nielsen off camera. So it didn't, to me, look like he had a particularly good run coming into the source, and then you would assume he wouldn't then get a particularly good run through Eau Rouge, but he clearly has. And let's see if Lang has got the pace to try and bridge a gap and get out of the draft of Dominic Knockel, or Nielsen rather. The advantage that he will have is that his teammate Knockel is going to be distracting Nielsen, because he is just behind him. Nielsen can't exactly focus just on what's in front of him, because he's also going to worry about exactly what's behind him. And we will see in a second the LMP2s are just about to catch the GTEs, and in turn I think we're going to get some LMDHs catching at the same time too. As you can see, Andrew Dawson here in a three-way fight, Cornelis and Michael Angus. Oh, we're going to go 3 wide down the Kemmel straight. Oh, how's this going to end? It happened 2 seasons ago. Is it going to be just as clean as it was then? And Michael Angus, I think, has made 2 places up there, because I'm pretty sure he was in 3rd of these 3. And he's managed to do a double overtake down the Kemmel straight. That is fantastic driving from Timu Michaelangus, who I believe has got a cheer squad in the YouTube chat. Of course, don't forget we are broadcasting on YouTube and Twitch. You're welcome to comment on there and join in the fun. And yeah, I'm sure Timu's fan club will be delighted to see that, and the fact we captured it on stream.
And what they've now done with that battle going on the back straight is they've brought the number 12 LMDh into this battle now. As you can see, Roman catching ever so slightly, following that back straight, so the battle going in, so hopefully in next lap round you might see a more overtake and maybe a 4 battle. So you can see the P2 leaders overtaking the GTA going up into the back straight.
And you can see
the racing so far.
Oh, it's been fantastic, and our eagle-eyed viewers will be able to see that Max Kuss is in 2nd, Galasso Lorenzo is in 3rd, and Charlotte Morelli is in the lead. So this is Kuss getting past Lorenzo. As you can see ahead of them, Charlotte Morelli has already got past both of them, and then as we saw in the live picture just before coming to the replay, I think Galasso Lorenzo, if not had an issue, is certainly taking it very cautiously, because he did not want to go past that GTE through Eau Rouge very sensibly. This is Morelli getting past Lorenzo on the previous lap, and again a nice simple overtake. Morelli perhaps just deciding now is the time. Maybe that's a strategic thing, knowing that we're about to get into traffic. But let's see just how much of a gap that Morelli can now build, because she certainly seems to have been the calmest driver. Oh, big power slide there from Arthur LeHook, just ahead of Sirica here. Unfortunately for Sirica, not really a part of the track you're going to be able to take advantage of that dodgy exit, because we've got all of these medium downforce corners. Maybe you can make a move into the braking zone, but they've got some GTEs to think about coming up. And again, that gap to Alexander Spets is just slowly getting bigger and bigger, but so many times before we have seen sort of 10 seconds gaps. As you see, the gap there for Sirica getting past that GT was very, very small indeed. But we have seen bigger gaps than 5 seconds get wiped out by an unfortunate error in the past, so this race is far from done just as we approach the halfway mark. And we've actually got Patrick Selassie in the pits. He, guessing, is trying to repair some of that damage from that incident earlier. We are very firmly in the pit window now, and we can follow the LMP2s as Galasso Lorenzo is not having a good time of it getting past these GTE traffic. He doesn't really want to be on the outside of the source here as the GTEs are going to possibly 3 wide. Schettino taking the inside line. Is he going to be able to take advantage of this? No, he is not. In fact, the outside line, as it turned out, was the right line to take. So it just goes to show you, commentators, there's a reason we're commentating and not driving. These drivers are the experts. We can talk about the racing, but I certainly wouldn't have been taking the outside line into the source. And Galasso Lorenzo very much showing me that he knows what he's doing more than I do.
There's a bit of contact there, Chris, if you didn't catch that. We're seeing him go on a rouge with the Porsche, then making contact below him, and then starting to overtake. Both the Corvettes.
Yeah, it's, I would say in a way that was quite good driving, considering just how chaotic it is beginning to get. But yes, we're just starting to see a little bit more hairy moments like we saw on the last lap between the LMP2, I think it was, and the GT coming through Pouhon, where you're just carrying so much speed. Those GTEs, they can't exactly go offline at a moment's notice. They don't have the downforce available to them that the other cars do. They really have to use the whole track, and you can see here again an LMP2 getting caught behind Esposito here, but not working out too badly in the end. Again, that was the number 26, that was Angel Guevara who's got through. We're going 3 wide multi-class here. This is what we love to see in ESS. We've got all 3 classes going 3 wide here. We're with Timu Michalangas there in the number 14 car, who seems to have done a very good job of getting through that chaos. And I really feel for the GTE here. They're just minding their own business, and they've got all these cars coming through. It's too much to think about, I think. I don't know how you feel about this, Michael, how you get on with the multi-class aspect of it.
Yeah, well, as long as you have a lot of trust in your GTE counterpart, as long as they're using plenty of room, which we are seeing quite a lot of, then you can get through the traffic quite easily. As you see, there is a couple of small gaps which are going to be to get through.
Yeah, we can see here Esposito and the number 32 Jurag Dusic. And now we've got an LMD again going 3 wide and another GT. There's just so much for these drivers to think about. So far so good, nobody has got caught in an accident, but as you can see there, Esposito has probably got a slightly better run than the Stasi did there. This is for the leading GT. We've got a Grodnik and Skorsad. They have been in P1 and P2 in this order the whole race long, and you can see Skorsad there really, really fuel saving. He dropped off so early along that straight, and perhaps that's just seeing that there is a prototype just behind him, just letting him through at a slightly easier place. That's the number 17 LMP2 of Max Kuss in second. So we've got basically the entire LMP2 field to come for these GTE drivers. Perhaps that's just Skorsad saying, look, I don't want us to get wrapped up in anything silly. And I think something unfortunate has happened. I've just heard a very cross driver in voice chatting game. I think that was Alessandro Pitiglio in the GT, who seems to still be running, so I suspect it's probably just an LMP2 or LMDh driver doing something a little bit silly, although he has got Leonardo Nastasi and Gianluigi Esposito company right behind him. But this is what we love about multi-class racing. It's the controlled chaos of all 3 classes trying to get past each other at the same time.
Yeah, certainly, especially in some of the tighter corners, you're all going to have a argy-bargy. The last thing you want is to accidentally cause somebody to go off track and ruin the race for them. But it is racing, things do happen. We've got all three teammates being currently in what position. Overall, they're 31st, second and 31st. But in class, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yep.
Two LMDHs coming through here. Not sure who they are at a quick glance because they're that fast going past the corners. Can't see numbers on the side.
Yep, and it's actually almost allowed Nastasi a run on Contiglio, but I think these guys might just be cooperating a bit more, but that is going to be a much better run for Nastasi into the La Source hairpin. And you can see Contiglio just defending that line a little bit again, just sort of saying back off, don't do anything silly here. We're in the middle of a fight, we're in the middle of traffic, and I think very wisely Leonardo Nastasi not doing anything too mad there. Of course, Nastasi was actually, I think, leading quite a few laps in the GT field at Hockenheim last week, so again, just goes to show you how strong the field is. As that's getting very tight there, and actually that's going to give it's going to give run. We're going to go 3 wide here, and we're going to go 4 wide. Oh God! Oh, there we go. Oh, and we've got further contact as the cars behind aren't slowing down. It's that risk-reward thing of they're keeping their foot through. They would have had so much time to react to that incident, but it's a very challenging thing. And further. Oh goodness me. That's it's not what we want to see. We've had 33 minutes of really top quality driving, and that is not part of that. Although I'm sure Leonardo Nastasi won't be too glad because he is no longer having to worry about being in a mad battle. But I think some of these drivers need to be told that you can't go 5 wide down the Kemmel Straight unless you're perhaps in Formula V's. But that's not really a car you want to be adding to the mix right now. I'm not sure those drivers would be enjoying it. Let's go to we've got a slightly calmer area of the track here. We've got Charlotte Morelli, who, for those of you who've not joined us from the start, Morelli was in second for the bulk of the start of this race, following just behind Galasso Lorenzo, actually bump drafting down the Kemmel Straight, and is being rewarded for that strategic driving now with a 4-second gap over Max Kuss, who again has managed to get past Lorenzo. And as we've seen in the previous seasons with here, is that if you're in a prototype class and you start building that gap, it just gets a little bit easier to deal with traffic because you're not having to worry about your competitors quite as much. As we can see, another 3-way battle here, this one between Eric Van Spijker, Danny Sabi and Alessandro Contiglio, who is probably carrying damage and will be dropping further back in the field. So we'll see if Sabi is able to build a gap over there and see if they can fight Van Spijker. We've now got quite a few cars have either pitted or have just come into the pits again. The pit window is very firmly open. They won't be quite at the end of their fuel tanks in any of these 3 classes, although do expect to see the LMP2s come in perhaps either at the end of this lap or the next. Again, I don't think anyone's done it, but Michael, I think it would have been sensible for some of these cars to pit to avoid the traffic, because if you look on that track map, there's a big chunk of clean track that someone could have dropped themselves into if they'd been looking at it. Yeah,
certainly you'll be looking at around about 12 maybe 15 seconds of a gap. Clean track there between Alexander Spets, leader of the LMDh, all the way back to the first GT car. So you would have thought somebody in either of the classes would have taken the advantage of coming into the pits with the actual one and only stop of this 1 hour sprinters to take the fuel on, to get back in that gap, to give themselves some nice clean air to hopefully gain a position. Unfortunately, we've not seen that, Chris.
No, I'm a big fan of alternate strategies. So our former colleague Tim Cox could definitely tell you, so we're going 2 wide here. That is the number 3 of Marina Sirica getting past an MP2 and really getting the advantage out of it, because that has held up the LMDh behind him. That's the number 5 of Renko, I think, if I've read that correctly, and the LMP2's in their own battle as well. I'm actually surprised to see that Efemenko didn't get held up so much that McCrelly behind him could really build. But yeah, it's been all action so far, and yeah, we're still waiting to see a few more of our drivers coming in. I think Cornelis and Dalgue in LMDh must have had an accident as well, because they're both being pitted and they're both being stopped for well over a minute now. So they're, as you can see on the timing tower to the left, they are dropping further and further down. They may well have been the secondary part of that crash we saw on the Kemmel Straight a few laps to go. Might be worth just having a look at the fastest laps for our drivers, because as much as Alexander Spets is in the lead comfortably in LMDh, he's not got the fastest lap in that class. That's actually Moreno Sirica, who is the only driver to have broken into the 157s, although only just with a 0.94. And then if we look in the LMP2s, there's, I mean, all the quickest drivers seem to be firmly in the mid 204s, and I think Charlotte Morelli is our quickest driver there. None of these drivers have set these fastest laps recently, although there are a few drivers doing green laps at the moment. Green meaning it's their personal best, not the class best. And again, it's the top two in GT, Grodnik and Skorsad, who've been so comfortably clear of everyone else. They have also been the only two, it seems, I think, to have broken into the 212s. Actually, Charlie Nilsson has as well, but of course, involved in that crash, he is no longer a factor at the top of the field for GTEs, which, looking at it, it's only Porsches and Chevrolets today, which is a shame, because we've got more than the two classes to be there. Obviously, Sean, our producer, big fan of the Ford. We saw quite a few last week, and they all seem to have dried up this week, which I think is a real shame.
Yeah, that's not used very often, Chris, in a lot of the endurance races, and I think that's because it's quite a difficult car to actually get to grips with, and that's why you don't see much of it going around. You will see it more in the endurance events that we have within the iRacing platform compared to the
I'm a sucker for when we've got multiple makes in the same class. Although I'm a big fan of the Chevrolet, so I'm going to be biased and be supporting Skorsad over Grodnik here, which is unfair, and I'll probably curse Skorsad by doing that. But yeah, we're still waiting to. I mean, I'm quite surprised we've not had anyone really coming into the pits just yet. But I think everyone is just doing the sort of the standard prime strategy of let your entire fuel tank burn out and then go in. But surely you'd be expecting to see some of these LMP2s coming in on this lap, but perhaps look out for someone like Charlotte Morelli, who might be able to do an extra lap based on how much fuel saving they managed earlier. But we're still, 22 minutes left in this race, or 21 and a half, and then when that clock ticks down to 0, the next time the P1 in LMDh crosses the line, that will be the end of the race. So if they're unlucky, or lucky, depends on your way of looking around, if Spence crosses that finish line with 2 seconds to go, he's got to do a whole extra lap, and so does everyone behind him. So that has caught us out in the past before with fuel strategies, so that's something to keep an eye out for later on in the race. We've said it earlier on, we'll say it probably every race until the end of time. These races aren't over until the checker flag has actually fallen, so let's not assume Alexander Spets has got this sewn up. I mean, again, when he's been as excellent a driver as he is, I seem to remember a Watkins Glen race that went very, very badly for him, despite being probably the quickest driver in the field. So again, raw pace doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win, although so far with that 6.5 second gap over Arthur LeHook, he's proven me wrong so far. I think it may have been Andrei Efemenko, and it's really not a place you would expect to see that happen, so I would love to see a replay of it.
Maybe he's gone wide there, Chris, and absolutely touched the gravel.
So we are going to get a replay of it now, hopefully. So this is Andrei Efemenko. I mean, he's already gone wide, and yet he's, I think, perhaps just leaving a bit too much room, or being forced to leave some room for that LMDh. And I mean, they're reasonably manoeuvrable, the Dallara P217s, but they're not the most dainty cars in the world. And I think once you're on the grass, he's a complete passenger, and that will be a real shame. He was running very well, and it is indeed LMP2 pit stop time, as everyone except for Morelli, Kuss and McCrelly have come into the pits, although let's just see if Angel Guevara does as well. Morelli just about letting that hybrid through Eau Rouge. I can imagine not being particularly amused that they've done that, but it's just the top three in LMP2. Charlotte Morelli really building that gap. Kuss is now 5 and a bit seconds behind, and when you consider 25 minutes into the race, that gap was about half a second. It really shows you the pace that Morelli has in that machinery right now. and indeed they've actually set the fastest lap of the race in the LMP2s on the previous lap, so that fuel tank is about as light as it could be as we're back with Eduard Roberte and then over to Selassie, who's back out trying to cover some places. I mean, we've had some incidents in the LMDh field and he's actually 10th in class despite being nearly 2 laps down, I think, well, only a lap and a half I think it is, and possibly not needing to pit again. So, you know, Selassie might be able to make some more places up. We are running a little championship for the broadcast split, and 10th place will net Selassie 1 point, which is, well, it's a lot better than 0 points. As our overall race leader Alexander Spets is into the pits, Lehook and Marcus Deck have followed in, Sirica as well. In fact, it seems like the entire LMDh field is coming in on the same lap. I'm guessing no one's managed to fuel save quite so much to go an extra lap through, and it'll be interesting to see if anyone's been able to just eke a bit of an extra, you know, be able to stop for a bit less time. Everyone's still stopped at the front of that field. Lorenco and Almeida earlier in the race, they were stopped for about 15 and 16 seconds. Spets has just done a 15.9. Lorenco was 15.43 and is actually climbing all the way up the field. Siri comes out, Lehook seems to be coming out in second, Lorenco's coming out in third, so pitting on lap 15, 6 laps earlier, and of course that also means Lorenco's going to be better adjusted to the feel of that car. We'll see if that's going to, he's only 1.3 seconds behind Artur Lehook. Let's see if he's able to bridge that gap to the draft point, and then he's able to make through. Sirica's down to 6th, he's behind Owen Carroll, though firmly in his draft. Are we going to see a move out of the pit lane on the Kemmel Straight? Doesn't look like he's close enough, but just how confident is he on the brakes? Not confident enough to do anything silly, because of course we've still got 17 minutes. He's still probably got about 8 laps, maybe 9 laps to go down that Kemmel Straight. I think, Michael, I don't know about you, I would be looking firmly at doing my moves down the Kemmel Straight and perhaps not even worrying about the rest of the track, just because it presents such a strong opportunity to make that overtake.
Yeah, at this part of the race you don't want to be making any silly mistakes, especially when there's only 16.5 minutes left. So I would stay, as long as your overtakes are clean on the Kemmel Straight, I would use there, and also the back straight as well, going into the final 2 corners. There's plenty of top straight line speed there for that overtake to be done. So we can see that overtake be done fairly shortly, especially with the top counting down as well. Just over 16 seconds. 15 minutes I stand corrected, 16 seconds. That's a very fast lap.
I think anyone that can do that would, it would take all the tension out of the race, I suspect. And this is one of our 3 really close battles on the track at the moment. We're going to go to that hybrid battle because Carroll is defending for his life against Sirica. Are we going to see Sirica make a move into the bus stop chicane? No. Oh, he has a very late move, very strong under braking, and any of you who have driven in this car knows how twitchy this car can be under braking. So Sirica's done a very good job there, but like we were saying just a minute ago, this is going to give Owen Carroll a really good opportunity along the Kemmel Straight, and it'll be a good test of if our theory earlier is correct, if Carroll is running a higher downforce setup, because he just doesn't seem to have the straight line speed to compete. He is ever so slightly gaining on Sirica, but it's about 100th of a second. Well, not 100%, that's even less. No, he's actually, and he's not been able to take Eau Rouge as well as Sirica. Sirica is now pulling away, so it's not working out for Owen Carroll. He's dropped 4 places from his starting position, although so has Sirica in 5th and 6th when they started 1st and 2nd. So I think they'll both be very disappointed with that, although I think it's fair to say 5th and 6th and the strength of this split is still a very strong position to be in. But it does look like Sirica's going to be able to bridge that gap. And yeah, someone worth mentioning, Marcus Deck, Michael, he's done really well, hasn't he?
Yeah, all 4 places from the start of the race. He's kept his race clean and tidy, and just focusing on getting to the end of the race, which has been improved to gain those 4 places from the start race. He's done well. The same as the LMP2 driver, Eduard Roberto, has gained 5 places from the start as well in the LMP2.
We're going to try and go to a replay now, because it looks like there may well have been an incident a short while ago. This is Matteo Frigerio, who was involved in, I think, the Kemmel Straight incident we had a little bit earlier. And we were just saying about how twitchy these cars are on the rear with the brakes, and I suspect carrying a bit of damage as well. I think Frigerio is calling it a day after that, which I think may well be the best. And we're back with Marcus Deck just to see. I mean, the nice thing for Deck here is that he's got a gap in front, he's got a gap behind. I wouldn't say you can relax, because I don't think it's possible to relax when you're this strong of a driver in this strong of a field, but he's not going to have to worry at the end of this race about any silly battles with anyone, and he can sort of try and consolidate a P8 qualify into a P4 result, which I think he'd be very happy with.
Yes, Chris, certainly. I would say if I was him, I would be happy staying where I was in P4, as long as he can maintain the speed and his position. P4, gaining 4 places would be a fantastic finish for Marcus Deck.
Yep, although, like we've said, racing isn't quite over yet. This is probably our closest battle on the field at the moment. They've got a 3-way here between Dominic Knockel, and then ahead of him we've got the 37 of Andreas Linder and the 30 of Lucas Lang, who I think probably would have been hoping he was no longer going to be involved in 3-way battles after the big incident he just managed to escape from earlier. And I think these GTEs are going to have one more round of LMDHs coming past them in the next few minutes. With P1 Alexander Spetz, the first of those, he is about to catch up with this gaggle of cars. And of course, he's going to be looking at protecting his lead. He probably isn't the one to worry about. He's not going to be mega aggressive because he's got a nice, comfortable 6-second gap. It's going to be Lehook and Alves to worry about, because they'll be on each other's tails, and then Deck and Saricha as well. So I think this is the trouble with the GTs at this stage. They don't want to be looking in their rearview mirror all the time, but they're going to have to. Spetz, I don't think I've seen many drivers look quite as confident in their car. Look how easily he's just got past the first GT there, not even really causing them much of a problem. And now he should easily get past the other two before the GT. I mean, GT is taking different approaches to which line they want Spetz to take, and not an issue because he's got past both of them before the braking zone, and now he's got a nice long Eau Rouge Kemmel Straight complex to do with nothing to worry about. However, I think Andreas Linder is looking pretty racy and is getting very close to Lucas Lang. If he can take Eau Rouge nice and safely and efficiently, and it looks like he's taking it more confidently than Lang, is he going to be able to get alongside the Kemmel Straight? Lang is defending that position. He's going to have the inside into the chicane. No, he's not. He's actually moved back across. But Linder opting not to make the move this time around. I think, again, he's perhaps just keeping half an eye on Dominic Knockel behind. Because, again, we've still probably got 5 more chances to make that overtake. And you can just see he's really hugging the back of that Porsche. He does seem to have the pace advantage on him right now, as Lehook, I think, that is coming through, catching him at a slightly awkward time. But it's probably more awkward for Lorenko. And you can just see, and you see they're really pushing there, just get a bit of a dust kick up as they're coming off the exit of that corner. And this will be a lovely way to demonstrate the difference in closing speeds around these 5-speed corners. Just enough of a gap for Lorenko there. It's actually compromised Lucas Lang a little bit, but is this a position on the track that Linder wants to make the move? Perhaps not. But then again, perhaps we'll see him line the move up through Blanchimont into the bus stop chicane. He certainly is close enough. But does he just want to keep waiting? Like we were saying earlier, does he want to just wait for the main opportunity on the Kemmel Straight?
Chris had a change for the lead in the GT category. Scorsand's now down into 2nd place. I wonder if he had not only just pitted or if he had to play the
Yeah, he seems to be having a good race, and he does seem to have bridged that gap, because don't forget, for the first half of the race they were usually within about a second of each other, and he has pulled that gap up to 4 seconds. And yeah, I think it may well have been a pit stop, I think, looking at the lap times, but a Grodnik, actually that may well be where the gap's been made. It was a slightly quicker pit stop for a Grodnik. So that's a great job by him, but again, this race is far from over. They've got a few more cars to come past them, and of course it could well be, Spa, we were talking about before we went live, Spa can be a bit of a pain of a track for off tracks. I mean, it's better than it was about 18 months ago, but like we saw last week, quite a few drivers at Hockenheim ended up serving drive-through penalties when they took 17x incident points, and there's a small chance that could happen to some of our drivers tonight. We might well see them just have to back off a little bit as we get to the end of the race, and that may well present an opportunity to come on Knuckle here. Again, he's now getting very close to Linda, who last lap was looking very close to Lang. But again, these GTs, I don't think we're going to see them make any moves in this second sector unless they absolutely have to, because they're really driving the absolute limit and using the whole range of the track just because of what their car is like. As I think Knuckle this time is going to be the one to lose out from traffic getting past him, but unfortunately that has slightly spread out this GT battle, but they've still got probably about 4 laps, maybe 3, to see what will happen. Alexander Spetz is coming up to the start line in not too long, and we can maybe work out how many laps he's got left, but more importantly we've got an actual fight on track here between the 31 and the 22, Schettino and Roberte. This is for the final step of the LMP2 podium. Again, it's, I mean, aside from 2 major incidents, it's been a pretty sensibly run race, no one doing anything too silly, and these are quite evenly matched drivers, Michael, so it'll be interesting to see if either of them are willing to just put that extra 1-2% effort in.
Yeah, certainly. It'd be definitely nice to see Roberto getting that final podium spot. I think he's probably deserved it a little bit more on the drive that he's had, but his gap's been consistent now, and it's around about 6-7 seconds, 0.6 of a second. To Shinfingo. So the fact that he's keeping that gap and maintaining it, he's not got long to pass him, Chris. So he's going to have to put his foot on that bit more if he wants that position.
Yeah, we've often seen it before. These last 10 minutes of the race, if you're in a battle, the aggression does just start ramping up because they are running out of time to make those moves. And you don't really have to think about fuel saving at this point, but Lang and Linda are getting closer and closer. Linda, I think, when there's no traffic, seems to be the quickest of these 3 drivers. He's looking very racy. He's within a 1/10 of a second. Is he going to make a move this time around? Lang is hugging that inside line. He does not want to give Linda the advantage, and he comes across in the braking zone. That was, I think, just on the okay side of cheeky aggression, because he probably moved across just before the braking zone, and I don't think Linda was at any risk of coming alongside, but that's Lucas Lang just sort of firing a little bit of a warning shot there, I think. And you can see in the background we've got another prototype for them to have to deal with, and that might well be Lang's opportunity. And unfortunately it sounds like Eduardo Roberte has crashed. We might be able to see what's happened there. It doesn't seem to be out of the race because he's now in a battle with Juraj Kusic. But let's see what happened there between Roberte and, I assume, Schettino. It looks like, I mean, a move into La Source and then, just outbraking himself. There may well have been slight netcode contact there, potentially, but I mean, I know I've certainly made that mistake before, where you're in a really big battle and you just outbrake yourself, although I'm not going to pretend I'm anywhere near the quality of the drivers on the grid tonight.
That's such a shame for Eduardo Roberte, just locking those brakes and touching the grass going into the corner. Commentators first, and we've just heard that Nick Langer's been a replay of that to show you that shortly. But here we are, to show that just now. And going on to the back straight and see what's happening here.
So he's just got past Vince Scorsad there, and again another LMDh driver getting caught out by the brakes of these cars. They are ever so twitchy on the rear if you get it slightly wrong. And I think Mikalangas had a bit of a run-in, I think, with Tony Lapola in the GT, who's running 9th in class. There were words exchanged over in-game voice chat, which didn't sound particularly friendly. I don't wish to stereotype too much. They are both Finnish. It could well just have been a hello. But this battle between Linda and Lang, this is, I mean, well, I say it's our closest. There's another battle raging in LMP2, but as we're on the Kemmel Straight, we should stay with this one. Is Linda going to make a move again? Lang, same as last lap, he's hugging that inside line. Has Linda got more of a run? He is going to pull alongside. Lang is yet again going to do the same thing. I think if he did that any later on the straight, it would be very naughty indeed, but it's just before the braking zone, and I think now it's happened once, it's perhaps less of an issue, but we've got a 3-way fight here for 4th in LMP2. Christian Brachelli is in 4th. Jusic we are following right now in the number 32, and Eduardo Roberte, after outbraking into the La Source hairpin, is in the 3rd of this, and he's dropping off a little bit here, but Jusic has got the run on Brachelli. He's going to get alongside before he even gets on the straight, so we probably won't see the same thing we're seeing in the GTE fight. In fact, he then goes defensive once he's got past. Is that actually going to compromise his line coming through the chicane here? It doesn't seem to have done. He's got that car stopped. But of course, the problem he's now got is that next lap, he's going to be the one having to defend on the Kemmel Straight. So, Michael, do you think we're going to see a comeback, or do we think Roberte is going to take McCrelly?
No, I think Roberte will take McCrelly, and if not this lap, definitely on the Kemmel Straight next time round. But it would be quite hard for McCrelly to keep hold of his position now, because Roberte wants that position back, and he seems quite eager to take it. So if he can get that in the next couple of corners, if not the next half a lap.
They certainly have to be mindful of that clock ticking down. Spence is about halfway round the lap. I think we're probably going to see 3 more laps, including the one we're on right now, if my maths is good, which I'm not making any promises about. But yeah, this 3-way battle here. Roberte will be wanting to make some of those places back up. He won't feel like this is where his actual pace should land him. Indeed, his fastest lap of the race is faster than everyone outside of the top 2 in the LMP2 field, which just shows you how fast he has been running, and he's getting very close here. Is Roberto going to make a move into the bus stop chicane? It doesn't look like he is, but this is surely being lined up for something into the Kemmel Straight. But let's not forget that Linda and Lang will be coming through there as well right now. In fact, they are, and it's going to probably be a repeat of the same thing as the last 2 laps. Linda really wants that inside line. He's not being given it, but he's got alongside. Lang's not able to close the gap. There is an LMDh just behind him as well. They're going to go too wide into the corner. Linda's going to have the outside, turning into the inside, turning into the outside again, but he looks to have got that move done. He closes the door. That was a lovely move as we now come into Rivage and have an LMDh to worry about. He closes the door on the LMDh, who, to be fair, isn't fighting for position right now, so he can afford to be a bit more selfish. And indeed, the LMDh is actually being very, very kind there, and we're now finally getting through. But Michael, that was a very solid move there, wasn't it?
That was a nice overtake then, fine. Beautiful inside, switch back to the outside. Fantastic. And here you can see Eduardo Roberte. As I said, Chris, would he go for the overtake in the next half a lap? Certainly. He's eager for that final podium, potentially, if he can get there. If not, it will be 4th position. He's trying to fight for it. But yeah, Chris, I did say he would take that position back, then he has to. And we've only got a minute and a quarter left, and here we are on board with Alexander Spetsnaz. I think he's now got this nailed.
I mean, it would take something disastrous for him to lose this from here. And again, I'm touching the wood of my desk. He may well slow down. It's going to be very tight for the start-finish line as to whether or not he is actually going to have to do another lap or not. It would very much be in his interest to slow right down, just to remove all that risk. But again, if you look on that track map, top part of it, it's a shame the LMP2s can't carry on for another 5-6 laps, because P3 all the way down to P8 are now in one train together, and the fight is going to get very close and frantic there. And in fact, I think Tino and Jusic have really caught up on Shatino. They're going to have a whole other lap to do, and Jusic has looked very, very strong in the last 10-15 minutes of the lap. In fact, there you can see Shatino, I think, has run out of petrol. He's had to go into the pit. Jusic he's inherited 3rd place, but Roberte has climbed right back. He was almost a full second a lap quicker than Jusic last time around. He's the quickest LMP2 on the field, and he has completely lined him up here. I'm sure Roberte is going to take another move into the Kemmel Straight here. Spets he's going to make sure we've got one more lap to do here, so we are now on the white flag lap. Anyone he overtakes on this lap will also be on the white flag lap, so that looks to be Pietro Shatino coming out of pit lane. Probably will have to now finish a lap down. Roberte doesn't actually look like he's been able to get the move done, so Jusic has had a very good Eau Rouge there to make sure he kept Roberte ahead, or perhaps Roberte is just being sensible, knowing they're going to have one more lap to do. And you can see how hard these LMP2s are pushing. That poor GT is now getting absolutely swamped, but again, not in a particularly frantic battle themselves, so just leaving the space. That is what we like to see in multi-class sprint racing. Let's just see how confident Jusic is willing to be. We haven't really seen that car wiggle like we have some of the other LMP2s. You can tell really pushing hard, just kissing that apex. This looks like very solid driving from Jusic so far. And in car number 32, this is actually a pretty strong underdog performance. He's actually one of the lower iRacing drivers in the LMP2 field, so a podium result here would be a fantastic result, although it does feel weird saying that about a 3.7k driver, because that is still a very, very strong driver indeed.
Well, Chris, he gained 7 places in this race from the start, so to say he's been racing clean, effective, and keeping his calm, it's fantastic to get them 7 places gained from the green flag. It's just unfortunate that the driver is not going to get that final podium position, which is a shame for him, but he's done well.
Well, and I think let's see how these GTEs affect this battle, because Jusic will want to make sure he gets past this GTE at a point that doesn't give Roberto that big run into the final speed. Angel Guevara, I think, has been caught out by the extra lap as well. He's had to go into the pits. As we see Alexander Spets, about as easy a race as someone could hope to have. He brings home the win in the LMDh field. He is 7.5 seconds clear of Arthur Lehook, who is no slouch himself. Lehook just going to come through now, and then Daniel Lorenko as well. But it looks like there has been an incident at some point as well. And we'll see what happened. In fact, Jusic has dropped a few places. So we're on board with Andre Viella here, and it looks like the crash has already happened, and a spin for Viella. But I think that might be Jusic. It is Jusic. Viella really struggling to get round there. God, that's not the best re-entry. We're now with Ogrodnik, or we're going to go to a replay, see what's happened here. This is we were in theory on board with Ogrodnik, who's coming round 3 seconds clear of Skorsad. I can confirm that Roberto is now up to 3rd. He's got a bit of a gap to McCrelly in 4th, and Jusic is in 5th. So I think Jusic was either tagged or spanned into the source hairpin, and seems to have not caused, but been involved in a chain reaction that Andre Vilela was part of as well, who's dropped down a bit as well. But we're just waiting for Ogrodnik to come through. With Charlotte Morelli as well, just ahead, who is going to be the winner of the LMP2 field. A very well strategized race there from Charlotte Morelli, who quite happily hung back in 2nd for the first half of the race, made their move, and solidly won LMP2. Tobias Ogrodnik as well. I think all of these cars are nearly out of field, because no one's been very willing to go much further past. And Jusic on the brakes, he's on the inside, and he's just lost it. Another LMDh. Sorry, LMP2, that's an LMP2 in fact, who's lost under braking, but that is a driver pushing to the absolute limit. He looks so secure. But I think with the way that the traffic was working out there, I suspect we would have seen Roberto possibly make the move on the Kemmel Straight anyway. It's a shame we didn't get to see it done on there, but we will now go to a promo and see you in a couple of minutes.
Take care.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
Welcome back, and we have got the standings up on the screen for you for our classes, so we'll just run you through those now. Alexander Spets, as we mentioned, the winner of the hybrid class. He was 7.5 seconds clear of Arthur Lehook in 2nd, with Daniel Alves having a pretty quiet race rounding out the podium, but he'll be happy with that 3rd. Marcus Deck in 4th, managed to keep Moreno Sirica behind him at the end. Timu Milikankas in 6th, with Owen Carroll 7th, up to 2nd at one point, but not able to translate that into a podium. Roman Bernalivo in 8th, with Bruno Almeida the last runner on the lead lap, with Patrick Svassi recovering to 10th and getting that point, with the remaining hybrids not finishing the race. and then we can have a look at the LMP2 standings as well. So, of course, Charlotte Morelli, she won the LMP2 split with Max Kuss in second. He did lead the first half hour, but I think Charlotte Morelli's pace just telling in the end. But you can just see the difference in class between those two and the rest of the field. Eduard Roberte in third really doesn't tell the full story of his race, because he was up into third and then down into about eighth and then back up to third again, with Andrei Efemenko in fourth, just ahead of Juraj Jusic, who I think can still hold his head high. Fifth is still a solid result for him. Andre Villela in sixth, Angel Guevara in seventh, and Christian McCrelly in eighth. A few of those drivers being caught out by the fuel, as was Pietro Schettino a lap down, and Tom Gambino a lap down, with Lorenzo and Full not able to finish. And last but certainly not least, our GTE field. Tobias Ogrodnik, he got the better of Vince Scorsad in the end in his Porsche. He wins 3 seconds clear of the Chevrolet, but again, similar to the LMP2, look at the difference in times between the top two and the rest. Andreas Linder, after that big battle with Lucas Lang that went on for about 7 or 8 laps, he got the better of him, but only by 0.2 of a second, but it means he gets to stand on the podium with Lang in fourth, Dominic Knockel in fifth, Eric Van Spijker, quite a quiet race from him, in sixth, Danny Sabi 8th, Danny Sabi 7th, Lapola 8th, Leonardo Nastasi in 9th, and this is everyone on the lead lap, with Charlie Nilsson picking up a point 2 laps down, with Patiglio, Esposito and Salo unable to finish. And of course, we are running a special league for the broadcast, so we can see the points for the championship for the hypercar, and Spetz is currently leading it. He has got the 25 points for today. That actually looks to me like it's just the points from today. That is SDK being its usual lovely self with these things, I suspect. But those of you who are not in the Discord, go in the YouTube description. We've got a link to the community Discord. The standings will be posted there later by producer Sean. And that's it. Michael, what did you make of your first race commentating? How did you find it?
It was very interesting, very good fun. And Chris, thank you for having me. Sean, as well, I would like to thank, and everyone who tuned in to watch the feed. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any points, find me in Discord or on the iRacing forums, and you can point me into the right direction. But I'm sure as the weeks go on, the more experience I will gain and the better I shall become.
It's been an absolute pleasure to commentate you. As you say, thanks to Sean Cranley-Swashy in the production booth as well. You can join us next week at 9 o'clock GMT on YouTube and on Twitch on Total Sim Sport, where we'll be coming from you from the Chaos Fest that is Monza. So we look forward to seeing you next week. I've been Chris Rowlands, and we'll see you soon. Good night.
Good night.